Hello, hello. Yes, sound check on.
Super.
So we succeed. Happy New Year again.
Great.
Hi, Verena. Nice to meet you again.
Ciao, Roberta.
Ciao, ciao. So let's go to our diretta. So we are live from you're now in?
I'm live from Chicago. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody.
Wow. So fortunately, it's a good time. It's not so early in the morning.
Perfect.
So, and the weather there?
Very nice.
Okay, not here, but okay. So thank you very much for joining us another time. And since you've been here in Gravity recently, so we have the chance to talk about your book and to talk about collaboration. It's very nice to have the chance now to have another conversation. But first of all, as we told the guest, you are going to present some slides and to talk about what's in your book, and then maybe we can have some Q&A and a short conversation after your presentation. So I give you the command line and let's go. Thank you very much, Verena.
Thank you so much, Roberta, for the kind introduction. Let me try and share my screen here, and you'll tell me if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it. Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay. So welcome, everybody. Even after almost 2 years into the Zoom world, and I've been fascinated to listen to Gloria right now about our futuristic digital world. I have to admit, I'm still pretty analog when it comes to certain things, particularly when it comes to human connection. So I have to say, I dearly miss to see you all. I know there's quite some people analog in the room, but also welcome to anybody listening live. So I think somehow this hybrid world is probably part of our future. That would have been one of my answers to Gloria. I think one of the multiple futures is hybrid, so we can connect the dots even more between human beings. So the topic that Roberta kindly asked me to reflect on is the new word co-opetition in healthcare. And I think it's such a perfect short summary of what our challenge is, but also our opportunity. So let me actually take 100 years step back when the world was even more analog, because one of my main themes that you'll hear me talk about today is because this is about innovation and innovation hub and how can we foster innovation in healthcare in the future. So my mantra and my motto is innovation happens at the intersections. And what do I mean by this? And let's remember that one probably of the biggest discoveries for human mankind was the discovery of penicillin. And many of you may remember that Alexander Fleming, he did not go one day, Monday morning, to the lab and say, today I'm going to discover penicillin. I want to treat infections. And we have discovered bacteria. And now I'm going to fix the problem with infections. And I'll find an antibiotic to kill the bugs and to cure patients. That's not what he did. He actually put the bacteria in a petri dish and went on vacation. And when he came back on the petri dish, it was full of fungus. And that fungus had killed the bacteria because it had produced penicillin, as we know. So it was actually, my theme here is serendipity. Serendipity is dearly needed for innovation. And some of us who have worked in the pharmaceutical industry know that that is our problem in pharma, as I've done, part of my professional life before I became an independent consultant, now helping everybody in the ecosystem work together more, is you can't drive discoveries with a project plan. And obviously the private sector, we need project plans so that we get stuff done. But discoveries and science and progress in medicine, you cannot put on a Gantt chart, and you cannot say, I will, as Alexander Fleming did not say, I go to the lab and I'll discover penicillin. Actually, what happens every day with researchers, but also with tech developers, you go with an hypothesis, to say, here's my problem. And my hypothesis is I'll fix it like this. This is how you raise grants. This is how you raise money. But actually, let's be honest, very often we do not find A, we actually find B. And B might be the even bigger discovery, but we didn't plan out to find B. So how does this happen? If we actually analyze our own stories and our own history and our own lives in our professional environment, we may find, well, all the great things we discovered, A, we discovered them not alone, but we discovered them together with other people, and probably with other people from sectors we didn't even think we would co-create something together. And then you have to have that obviously grain of salt of luck at those intersections. So what does that mean actually to healthcare? And just one last word, because I put this in this morning thinking I'm talking mainly to an Italian audience, when I was thinking like, why the intersections? How does the intersection come into play with serendipity? Well, it's actually like you're cooking a good pasta. You have all the ingredients isolated on the side. It's like the different stakeholders, you have them all on the side. And I'm going to get to who those stakeholders are in healthcare. But actually, the pasta alone, the tomato alone, the meat alone is fine, but it's just not as fun and as good as you mix them all together. So it's the notion of cross-fertilization that actually will ignite discoveries and innovation. The problem is, in real life, the tomato and the spaghetti, they may be competitors. And I'll tell you who that is in healthcare. But we need to overcome and manage that intersection so that we can be productive together. So here's my kind of outline for this afternoon and this morning for us to discuss later on. So in healthcare, our issue is we're not a homogeneous industry. So we're not like the electronic industry or the hospitality industry that has a very homogeneous common customer and common kind of strategy on how to deliver value and outcomes to these customers. So in healthcare, and that's my mantra of the 5P, we basically have all these 5 stakeholders. And the way it's depicted graphically here is on purpose because the way we operate today is in isolation. So our quandary in healthcare is that we're intimately linked to each other, yet in our day lives, we operate like we were the only one, and we try to drive the maximum benefit to our own benefit. So it's about bargaining power. So if you think about the value chain, it is about the patient receiving care, it's the provider delivering this care, it's pharma developing that care, it's payers paying for the care, and it's policy setting the ethical and regulatory safeguards for this value chain. So the hypothesis is we must manage these intersections and these silos to really drive innovation in healthcare. I'll reflect a little bit deeper at a couple of levels on what our problem is, because if we're not cognizant of the problem, we can't really move beyond those silos, those intersections. And then, of course, how do we do this? How do we effectively manage intersections? What are the solutions? And then I'll wrap it up with takeaways for our discussion. So I think here we come back to this word competition. So the fact that in a business setting, you may be my competitor and my partner is not a new concept, and B is not very specific to healthcare. And this is a very recent paper from the Harvard Business Review issued earlier this year, where they really go very much in detail and invite you to read it if you haven't done so yet. And I pasted also a recent book from Marco Bertini and Odette Königsberg, because they actually say the same thing along similar lines. It's like we need to stop selling in a transactional fashion, just having our own benefits in mind, but we have to cross that bridge over the intersections and always have the consumer and the customer in mind when we want to really deliver outcomes that matter to them and results that matter to the customer, and hence create value. So you're constantly involved in this building bridges from one stakeholder to the other. And going back 2,000-3,000 years, Aristotle said it, better than anybody else. It is not about just the sums 1 + 1 is 2, but 1 + 1 is 3, because the whole that you generate by the cross-fertilization will always be gaining more value and more actually profit if you look at it from a business perspective than if you would drive it on your own. So what is the problem really in healthcare? The problem is, as I already alluded to, is we're not a homogeneous industry. It is really our huge complexity, and it's probably the most complex industry. Although, or let's say it's the most complex industry, and in many countries, it is the biggest industry. So in the United States, healthcare is by far the largest employer if you look across the 5 Ps, and it's actually equaling 20% of the country's GDP, which is actually in 2020 was a total of $4 trillion only in the healthcare sector. So we must find a way to manage those intersections. And so number one problem is our silos. As I alluded to, the 5 Ps, we operate in isolation. Pharmaceutical is looking at, optimizing returns and benefits. The payers will always only look at their budget that they have. Hospitals are being accused and doctors of being greedy at times and also looking only at benefits. And the policymaker is accused of not seeing the whole picture and only looking at the law. And obviously the patient is the weakest in this whole chain. So that per se, you could say, well, fine, it has been very productive as a whole, particularly the whole pharmaceutical, medtech, life science sector has been incredibly successful with incredible gains in longevity, progress in medicine, treating cancer, treating infections, etc. But our problem right now is, and I'm leading to my next slide, is that silos are the number one problem we have because it kills innovation. If we don't change our narrative and our mindset, we will actually go downhill with our rate of innovation, which has been a great productivity line if you think about it in the last 20, 30 years, particularly in spaces like oncology with fantastic innovation. But we're probably at a zenith right now. And if we do not change our mindset and our ways of working, that zenith, we are beyond it, and we will see declining rates of new discoveries. So the problem with those silos is today, and I think the headlines are plenty, and you all have heard it, is we have a cost problem. Everybody's talking about it. It's like healthcare and medicine is too costly. If you pull up a journal or your app on the news, I'm sure there's going to be a headline about too expensive drug prices, singling out villains on who possibly is the putative villain on the problem that we have, not enough money and rising cost, is an easy thing to do, but it's not fixing our problem. Because if you're singling out and finger point to one of the 5 Ps, you continue just the same behavior of silo mentality. The problem we have today is, yes, we have a broken balance between innovation and affordability because we cannot de facto pay anymore for the great progress in medicine. The consequence of this is not to finger point to one cause because we all share the responsibility. So the root cause is shared and the solution is shared. So another problem that we must have in mind is that our systems are fundamentally based on the wrong incentives. And I'm leading into my book, so that's what I'm citing in the introduction of the book, is if you incentivize volume, basically, so actions, services, pills, procedures, what you actually get is an expectation of services, actions, pills, and procedures, and it drives cost up. And that's why in the whole debate I'm saying, we need the policymaker, because it's not one of the 5 Ps. It's not a hospital or a pharmaceutical company or an insurance company that tomorrow can say, oh, I don't pay for services anymore. I pay for outcomes. So switching the incentive away from money towards the results that matter to customers. It's not one actor and stakeholder alone that can decide that, right? So you need legal frameworks for this. You need a crosstalk of all those 5 Ps, developing and co-creating that new system together. And when I get to the solutions, I'll tell you, I can already give you maybe a snippet. It's called value-based healthcare. And I'm getting to this later on, which would be the solution to this particular problem of wrong incentives. And by the way, I invite you to look at this YouTube video of Professor Eneman, who really in 7 minutes, in almost like a TED Talk, describes it beautifully, what our cost and quality and value problem is in healthcare in terms of wrong incentives. And also, by the way, happy to share my slides. Anybody, please drop me a line. So the problem for people today working in this ecosystem is we still want to make progress, right? So we haven't solved the whole ecosystem problem yet. So our hurdles are plentiful and our roadblocks are plentiful. So, and I'm sure all of you can relate to this. So if we want to make progress across those intersections today, we face legal hurdles, regulatory roadblocks, data privacy roadblocks, financial, investor conversations, cultural, lingo. We also actually have massive IT infrastructure roadblocks because we deal with legacy systems that haven't been updated yet. So that is what, part of our reality today looks like. And in terms of just the notion of those 7 hurdles that I call across the drug development cycle. So you develop a new product, but it's also true for digital applications, for health management. The same process applies. You have a development stage, in this case, drug discovery, and then your clinical phase 1, 2, 3 studies. And then you have a regulatory hurdle. You need to have FDA or EMA approval. And then obviously you have the payer hurdle with market access. You need to get your treatment reimbursed and paid for. And then you still need to have it used, and you need to have a marketing machinery to be successful for eventually the patient-derived benefit. So the reason why I'm mentioning this here is coming back to our intersections and our silos. And that is our true problem in healthcare, very different from other sectors. Each of these 7 hurdles, there are people behind, and there's deep knowledge and expertise behind. So a drug discoverer on the bench that works, a chemist that works on molecules, has a very distinct, different set of expertise than the clinical drug developer, than the regulatory person, than the payer, or than the marketeer, for example. So our challenge is we need to bridge all those expertises. We need to find a lingo and a language that we can talk to each other, because the thing we must do in terms of solutions is we need to agree on our common North Star and our common purpose. But that is actually an intersection we have to manage. It's all these different sets of expertise that are in real life so tough to bridge. And some of this is then actually driving this cost explosion, because we all operate in our silos, in our expertise, and we constantly on an everyday basis miss the opportunity to find efficiencies. So we duplicate, and I'm sure you all have seen it yourself when you go to the doctor, duplicate testing, duplication of billing sometimes. So we live in this ecosystem of waste. And that is not a topic alone in healthcare. We have a waste issue in our ecology and nature in general. But in healthcare, we just can't afford it anymore. And I invite you, in my book, I have a deep analysis of the facts and the numbers. And it goes up to 50% of healthcare dollar spent that is wasted. And remember the number I mentioned for the United States with $4 trillion healthcare budget per year. That means that up to $2 trillion could be wasted. So I'm actually saying we do not have a problem of resource shortages in healthcare. Our problem is that the resources are in the wrong place because we do not manage the intersections and we live in silo. And the shocking, as I said earlier, our innovation is at a zenith, and we're probably seeing in the future, if we do not change our mindset and our behaviors, we will see a decline in innovation. And you already see it on the left-hand chart here, which is the correlation between healthcare spending per capita and the longevity. So basically your life expectancy. And you see already in the case of the US that over $10,000 are spent for each person on healthcare, yet it has the shortest life expectancy, and life expectancy is actually declining. So these are, you can debate, is this related? What's the root cause? You can kind of argue, but those are facts we have to deal with. So coming to my book, It Takes Five to Tango in Healthcare, from Competition to Cooperation. Really in part one, that's what I'm dealing with, what I just kind of alluded to, some nuggets. But let's move to the much more exciting part now. What is it we actually can do? Because that is the good news. The solutions and the tools are all there. We don't even have to invent them. We just have to use them and apply them. Our challenge is the co-opetition. Is right now we are only working, and I'm a little provocative to stir the discussion, we're only working in isolation across those 5 Ps. The day we start working together and build those bridges, we can innovate and renovate and modernize at fast speed. And I'm telling many, many examples in the book on where this is actually happening in real life. So it's not only a theory of scholars or of an author, but it actually is happening in real life. So as I said, value-based healthcare, I go in much detail in chapter 3, and I'm alluding to it a little bit here. You have heard fascinating new things around digital just in the talk before. And digital, by the way, is the #1 enabler to help us manage our intersections. So we need IT interoperability so that we can actually exchange information. And we've seen it with COVID. It actually works when you have a sense of urgency and you share and do open crowdsourcing of data. So remember, COVID discovery still today, everything's open access. And we have interoperable systems to share that information between the public and the private sector. And then obviously, what I work on in my day job as a consultant a lot is what I describe in chapter 5, is adopting a playbook for multi-party collaboration to catalyze change behavior. We'll say, what do we actually do? If I'm in pharma, you're a payer, and we sit with a provider, what do we actually do at that negotiation table? How do we actually manage our intersections in real life? So right now, what we need is that public-private dialogue across the 5 Ps on how we can actually evolve in the sense of innovation, which there has been quite a monopoly in the pharmaceutical industry for good reasons, because it's a high-risk, high-cost endeavor that only the private sector was able to stem. However, we need to have this more inclusive co-opetition approach to think about what other, and Gloria gave you great examples on other health interventions that can help and make, a contribution to people's health and innovation. And in an increasingly value-based world, and remember I mentioned Marco Bertini and Odette Königsberg in the beginning, that talk about all other industries and how important it is to stop selling and deliver outcomes and results to people instead, to drive value. For us in healthcare, it means new products have to show breakthrough potential to transform the natural course of a disease and to solve an unmet need in order to justify investment costs and commercialization costs. So to give you a couple of examples on how we can effectively remove those roadblocks, break down silos, and work together more, is it basically a 2-step approach. #1, we all must reflect on who our ultimate customer in healthcare is. It is the patient. And actually talking about what Gloria just said before, the digital revolution is actually pushing this big time ahead, because the patient becomes actually a consumer with the digital world, with wearables, with smart apps, etc. So they're actually gaining power as a consumer/customer to drive the change of the narrative. It's very fascinating to see that. So I think that should be our get-go in the value chain. Remember, it's all about delivering care and health to people, the patient. So when you look at the diagram on the right-hand side, I cited a few examples where you can see that in silo, you cannot find the solution. So let's look at contracts. So between providers, payers, and policymakers to develop new contracts on how to reimburse a new therapy, or how to pay for a care that was delivered in a hospital. If you want to modernize those contracts on an outcome base to reward and pay for outcomes of patients, for example, the hip replacement, you don't pay for the surgery and the material, but you will pay actually if the patient can walk again 3 months later, 6 months later. That's what we mean with actually contracts or bundled contracts. And that example shows you one actor alone cannot have this conversation with themselves. You have to have the payer, the provider, and the policymaker at the table. If you want to innovate and accelerate drug development, same thing. You cannot say, I'm going to write a new guideline on how to accelerate digital applications for, let's say, Parkinson's disease. You need to have a conversation with your regulatory authority. You need to have a conversation with the insurer who's going to pay for this. You need to have the tech people, by the way, at the table, and you need to have the clinicians at the table. So to innovate, drug development here as a proxy for innovation in general in healthcare, you quickly see you constantly need all these people to talk together. So if you think about the 7 hurdles of drug development I mentioned earlier, what we've done in the past, we've been very sequential on engaging all these people. We've discovered the molecule on the bench, then we've done the clinical trial. When that clinical trial had positive data, we went to the FDA. When we got an FDA approval, we thought, oh, we also need reimbursement. We go to the payer. And then we say, oh, we also need to market this product and do marketing. So you lose 10 years. We can't afford this, and it costs over $1 billion. So you need to actually do this approach from day one, even if and I'm working a lot with startup companies right now, both in the drug development and in the digital era. You need to have constantly these dialogues with all these 5 people, even at your earliest seed round of funding, and not wait until you get your regulatory approval for your innovation. So that is really kind of the claim what we're making here. And that is to finish off, it's actually the easiest and the hardest in the same way. I said to you earlier, so 3 of us may be sitting in a room, and so what do? So the holy grail here, and I did not come up with these 7 steps to multi-party collaboration. This is based on the Harvard negotiation project that is coming actually out of the world of conflict and dispute resolution. But you don't need a conflict to apply this. It's applicable for any situation where interests are very far apart. And you can imagine in the 5 Ps, we have interests that are very far apart. Yet, as we have learned, we have to manage our intersections. So the number 1 is to refocus on what's our ultimate goal, who's our ultimate customer, and which value and purpose do we pursue. And aligning on that purpose and having a conversation, open conversation on what our interests are and share them, and then identify which is the common ground of our joint interests is all what that chapter is about. And it's all what I'm doing in my day job to help people. For the sake of time, we can't go in all the details and examples. So I'm listing tons of real life examples where this is actually working. So it's not only a theoretical framework, it is actually something that when you start applying it and you start thinking, who else do I need out of this ecosystem to work on my problem and my invention today, you actually can make it work, and you will find faster solutions to your invention and maybe also your problem, and it will be cheaper. So that is really kind of the holy grail on how to make it happen on an interhuman relationship. So to sum it all up, I want to refer you, this is all not new stuff, unfortunately. We are a little bit late in healthcare because those principles were developed almost 20 years ago. And I want to read again a quotation from Michael Porter, again, that's 15 years old, but it's so relevant and I'm sure you can relate to it. Business is caught in a vicious circle. A big part of the problem lies with companies themselves, which remain trapped in an outdated, narrow approach to value creation. Focused on optimizing short-term financial performance, they overlook the greatest unmet needs in the market, as well as broader influences on their long-term success. Why else would companies ignore the well-being of their customers, the depletion of natural resources vital to their business, the viability of suppliers, and the economic distress of the communities in which they produce and sell. So I am saying the future of healthcare will lie with those who compete and cooperate and win on value delivered to the customer. And we need to actually innovate our understanding of who the customer is. Obviously, there are multiple customers, but in my decade in pharmaceutical industry, our only customer we ever thought of was the prescriber. And yes, that is a very important customer, but it's not the only one, and the ultimate should always be the patient. So it's for us almost to go back and make a Gantt or a flip chart and draw who are all your various customers, and you need to deliver value to all of them. So in summary, you remember my kind of highway intersection here. So the way really to do that is to tango or to dance in a tango for five, to move from fragmentation to coordination. And it will take moments of healthy tension and co-opetition where you need to figure out, okay, here we are competitors, but over here we must partner to drive the solution because we both will win. Remember Aristotle, who said the whole is greater than only the sum of its parts. And so to wrap up also with my book, the conclusion chapter, actually, I'm summarizing the 10 big action items we can do to go big or to go home, and really drive that fundamental mindset shift here on the left from a fixing system in healthcare to preventing, from actually paying for illness rather than to preventing health. So I think we all have this cultural mind shift, and it comes down to all of us as individual leaders in order to come back to restoring the broken balance and keep up the great pace of innovation and progress in medicine we have had so far, while keeping it affordable and while delivering results that matter to people. So I invite you to have a look at the book. I'm always open and so happy to hear feedback, actually, because the whole purpose is to grow the community of practice and to share what's working and what's not working, and helping each other in the spirit of co-opetition. So in my day job, I have founded an enterprise called 5P Healthcare Solutions, where we actually work with leaders of any of the 5Ps in the ecosystem to manage their particular intersections, to find solutions. And we come in to work on projects. So if you have an intervention and you say, how do I talk to EMA? How do I talk to FDA? How do I bring the insurance company to the table? How do I, make a 5P investment plan? So those things we help. We also do individual coaching on the skill set, on the 7 steps. And I'm also available for keynote lectures like this one and interactions in moderating the conversations in order to grow the community of practice. And with this, I believe I hand it over to Roberta, and thank you for your attention. And I'm looking forward to, we have, I guess, a good 10 minutes for discussion.
Thank you, Verena. Thank you for sharing the presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you great.
I know, maybe we can stop the
sharing.
Yes, if you stop the
okay.
sharing, we can see. Okay, let's see. So thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to hear you. And I read your book, and it's really great. Also because it's readable by people from each of the 5P. So it's interesting also for a patient, for people that care about their healthcare. So, but also obviously from the professional stakeholders. And coming through your presentation and the book, some few days ago, I was in a meeting with some public healthcare stakeholder. It was interesting because for the first time, I heard someone speaking about outcome and speaking about what we can do in future. So I raised my hand, okay, I suggest the 5P and the Tango for 5. So I mentioned you, but also the vision that is a common element between you and us, Gravity. So concerning the outcome, in some ways is difficult for the organization to change, because it's also a change in mentality in the way. So it's a sort of an issue of change management when you have to address an outcome instead of just do the therapies or release something. So in your opinion, how, for example, an infrastructure, an hospital, or anyway a stakeholder that is involved in healthcare can start from which element we have to start to think about an healthcare based on an outcome view?
Yes, and maybe I can give two examples, one from drug development, so more the pharma and private sector, and one from the provider and hospital sector, as you said. And I think what they have in common is it comes down to people. It comes down, and I think on one slide I'm saying it takes two people and a sense of urgency. And our biggest roadblock is ourselves, because we are so ingrained and we have grown up and we've been educated in a silo mentality. So sometimes I think it's almost a lack of creativity and imagination. Sometimes we can't even imagine that, what do you mean? That insurance company, they will never listen to me. I don't even know who I should call. I don't even know them. They don't even answer my email. So and it is true, it's our reality. We have not been speaking to each other. We have not moved yet from competition to cooperation in a co-opetition state. And so the example I want to say is, let's maybe start with drug development, because I think we're pretty much an innovator and startup ecosystem here in the audience. So I would really advise everyone, when you start thinking about a new therapy for a patient or a new digital health application or a new drug, what I see in my day job, day in and day out, is people think only about 2 of the 7 hurdles. They only think about the clinical hurdle. I need to generate the data for the patient. Of course, you have to. And then the next thing, the only thing they think about is the FDA or the EMA or your local health authority. And yes, you have to think about these 2 things, but you cannot stop there. If you stop there and you don't think about how will you actually price your intervention, and how will you engage with having the right insights on how to position your new intervention and your product with your ultimate consumer. Remember, patients are becoming consumers and they will make decisions. So you need to have the voice of the patient, of the prescribing doctor, of the health insurance, even at the earliest round of your angel and seed funding. And people are very surprised when I'm saying this in real life, because they say, well, I first need the clinical data, and then I need to talk to the FDA if they agree to the plan. And I'm saying, yes, you have to, but you also have to think of these others, because the graveyard is full of failed innovations that have never been used, that have never been reimbursed, and it's wasted money. And I tell you, investors, look at these things. Investors will actually push the needle because they are asking these questions now. And there's kind of public knowledge of public investor calls that have gone sideways because the executive board wasn't able to answer all these questions beyond the clinical and regulatory hurdle. For the hospital, very briefly, I have examples of countries where it took one hospital administrator, or let's say one physician, one chief of department, and one leader at a health insurance that were individual visionary people looking beyond their silos, and that said they'd met each other at a meeting like this, and that would pick up the phone and say, I liked what you said, can we have a conversation? And then ended up in a 10 years 5P contract for a certain therapeutic area.
It was impressive. Yes. It starts from the Braves. So, and coming through the data you show, I was really impressed, for example, by the chart in which you point out, for example, the cost of the healthcare cost compared to the survival age or the age compared, for example, from Italy and US. And it's impressive the fact that in US you have a lot, and there is a huge expense on healthcare, but with poor result anyway, because if the population has a low life expectancy, this is really a problem. And since we are facing, especially in Italy, but I think in not only in our country, an aging wave of population that we are going to face this issue very, very soon. What do you think this could be the impact, and how some changes in approaching healthcare can help us in face the stage of an aging population and the impact on the healthcare system, in your opinion?
Yes, I think you're putting really the hitting the nail on the head, because our kind of three main mega trends of the future, as you say, is aging, is mental health, and in general chronic diseases. And all of them don't fit in our legacy 1.0 healthcare world of silos. Because remember what I said, our incentives right now are wrong, because we're incentivizing actions, procedures, and pills. So what you get is actions, procedures, and pills. None of them help chronic diseases, the aging population, and to a certain extent, mental health. Because of course you need a pill, but the problem is we have a problem of waste. So right now, not everything needs to be dealt with a pill. And it's a culture that is joined. And again, it's not one villain that has the problem. It's not only bad pharma, but it's also a culture in the doctors. I have been trained to prescribe. Even as patients, let's be honest. Maybe
it's
when
demanding. So if you go to the doctor and the doctor doesn't prescribe you something,
it's a bad doctor.
Not a good doctor. It's a bad doctor. Something to fix my pain, to fix something. No?
Exactly. So it is, again, back to what I was alluding to earlier. It's a shared problem, so the solution must be shared. So I think a couple of thoughts here to your question. I think we need to drive the public narrative and debate. So we need to think, again, our customers is also, journalists and the media. We need to have many more conversations like this on public live streams to engage and broaden and share the ideas that change is possible. Because remember, that is our number one problem, is we are so stuck in the silos. We lack the creative imagination to think that change is even possible. So things like this, we think it is nothing, it's no impact. I think if we amplify what we're doing here today, that is a big important thing to really let people know that options are there. And the second one is then to what you did yesterday, is let's go to those platforms where 5P representatives are meeting, and let's get engaged and drop the word about value-based healthcare. Let's drop the word about all those examples that are out there that are existing. So it's not a theoretical framework that people say, well, you're crazy and it will never work. So I think it is engaging in that change of the narrative, best practice share, grow the community of practice, and say what's possible, and then really think about, move beyond the transactional thinking. Don't look at the health authority as a service provider. Don't look at the health insurance as a service provider. Look at them as strategic partners with whom you can co-create new solutions that you don't even know that exist yet. But don't, move beyond the confrontative, you bad payer, you don't want to reimburse my new invention, or you bad FDA, you don't get it, you don't want to approve. So start earlier, then it's too late, but start earlier and involve them. People want to be, very human nature, you want to be involved, you want to be engaged. And then people are more open to innovative solutions together.
Thank you. Your experience is so precious, and we are so proud to have you in our also Hall of Fame of international mentors. So we are glad to for this relation with you, Brooke. It's very exciting to go through this issue. And a last question: in your opinion, how could be the role of, for example, an innovation hub like we are in this process?
Yes, it's key. when I said earlier, we need to do more of these things and live stream it and share our conversations so that we can ignite imagination and creativity and motivation in all the other people out there. And in order to do that, you need innovation platforms like yours. So we need, and you say it perfectly on your mission and on your website, it's a digital and an analog hub. So you need to do both. You need to create the digital infrastructure for interoperability. I think it's key. The investments really need to go in there because we're losing so much efficiency and cost and money in just legacy infrastructure where I can't even send a CD-ROM with my X-ray to the hospital next door because they use a different system. And then we need amplifiers and catalyzers and catalysts like you are and like I am in my day job to help the connectivity among the 5P. It's critical.
Perfect. So thank you very much, Verena. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, to hear you. And I think that we are in a seeding stage on these very interesting topics. So we hope to host you, and next time maybe here, not from Chicago, but here by the hub last time. And so thank you very much. If there are no questions or there are some questions, I ask Riccardo if there are some questions from the audience or not.
And while we wait,
we can collect, no question, okay. Eventually we can collect and send you and maybe do something offline next. So thank you very much. And
thank you, Roberta.
You want to follow us during these 2 days we are here, always live.
Thank you very much, Roberta. And great stuff that you're doing. That's exactly where we should be.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, Verena. Bye-bye.